My name is Mike, and this is a bike. This is a Victory V92. This is a 2002, which was kind of a transition year between what they called the Hammer engine and the Freedom engine. There was a lot of improvements in the early years. And I happened to see this one sitting out in a guy's yard for probably 8 years or so. So that means, well, fuel's turned to crap, the grizzly squirrels have eaten the wire harnesses, and the tires are probably about ready to rot right off of it, and anything that was leather on it's turned to crap because, well, the elements aren't kind to machines. Well, stick around. We're going to see if this thing will start and run. I had seen this bike in a guy's yard for many years driving by, and finally decided to stop and leave a note on his front door, and he called me back and said, yeah, it's for sale. So I ran out and got it. So let's see if we can get her to run. Somewhere in a dusty, dirty back alley in western Arizona is an old fart trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. He'll work on anything, just as long as it has at least 2 cool wheels. A little walk around on this fine beauty. This is a 2002 model year Victory V92C, and this was essentially the first year of the what they called the Freedom engine. Some of the lower components look like the original Hammer engine, but if you look at the cylinders and the valve covers and so forth, they're significantly different. They made a lot of changes, not only to the appearance, but also to the inner workings, to the drive, to the valve train, and to the transmission and some other components where they felt that they could improve. And these are really, really good engines. These easily go 200,000 and 300,000 miles with just regular routine service. The fairing is an aftermarket fairing, batwing fairing, and it looks like a very traditional batwing fairing. I'm not a real big fan of them on Victories because, well, they make it look way too much like a Harley. Now, don't get me wrong. I got nothing against Harley Davidson. It's just that one of the reasons that I personally like Victories is because, well, they're not Harley Davidsons. There's something different. There's something unique, and I kind of like it when they look like something different and unique. The trunk on the back as well is also a very Harley-looking trunk. So very likely as I go through and restore this bike, I'm very likely not going to reuse them. I'll probably sell them to another individual who might want them and go with something that would more easily match the Victory theme. The saddlebags, as you can see, well, the weather hasn't been a friend to them. If we look back here, this side is just completely disintegrating. I don't know if that can be stitched back together or if it's even worth trying. They look like they were really good bags because they're a hard plastic shell with a leather outer casing. It's kind of too bad that the weather took its toll the way that it did. You can tell it sat in this guy's yard for a very long time. Pretty good, significant layers of dust and weeds and brambles and small trees and so forth growing all up inside of it. If we look at the kickstand, you can see the kickstand was buried in mud for quite some time, and well, we've got cobwebs and squirrel poop and all kinds of stuff cluttered around underneath it as well. If the bike was newer, it probably looked really nice. It's got a nice pinstripe. Somebody's taken the time to do some nice little striping work on the side covers and on the front fender as well. And I think once we get the worn out, decomposing leather off of it and get it cleaned up a little bit, we'd probably get it to look pretty good. I'm thinking this bike will probably clean up pretty surprisingly nicely. Right out of the gate, well, we got to get into that fuel system, you know. Fuel these days is absolute garbage, especially if it's got ethanol in it. And unfortunately, most places you can't get ethanol-free fuel. And so the ethanol, it bonds with water, and it just does horrible damage to your entire fuel system, your tank, your injectors, or if you have a carbureted engine, your carburetor. And we've talked about carburetors quite a bit in the last couple of episodes, and we've had to clean quite a few of them out. And that's just an ongoing battle. Whether it's fuel injected or carbureted, you're going to have issues as fuel breaks down over time. This one had a stereo in it. Yep, we got the speakers in the bat wing there. Somebody's made a custom little panel here to isolate the speedometer, so that's kind of unique and interesting. And the stereo itself, well, it's actually back in one of these bags. He showed me, if I can figure out how to open the darn thing. Which side is the hinge on? I can't tell. Sorry, guys. It's not as if I work on motorcycles or anything, right? But anyway, we're going to get to the fuel system. We'll pull up the seat. We'll pull up the tank. We'll get in there, and we'll see if we can get the thing to fire up and run. You know, these when these vehicles sit out in a field like this, rodents get into them and nibble and chew. You know, there's field mice, there's pack rats, there's grizzly squirrels. And one thing all of them will attest to is that one of the most delicious things on earth are electrical wires in vehicles. Delicious copper coated with a savory blue or red or purple plastic coating. And they'll just nibble on every wire they can find. Well, it's a good looking bike though. It'll clean up nicely, guys. So here we go. Let's dig in. All right. We want to remove the seat so we can get to the fuel tank bolts. To do that, on the early bikes, you had a key slot in the back fender that you could use the ignition key to release it, and then the seat would come off. On the later ones, you would use the ignition key by rotating it in the opposite direction past the off position. So let's see if that. I'm gonna go in. What the hell? These are supposed to be the right keys. I'm going to try the trunk key, see if it works. Make sure we got the right keys to begin with. It fits the slot anyway, at least that works. That does, so that is the correct key for that. So I assume that was supposed to be the ignition key, and I can't tell you why it doesn't work. Very interesting. Huh. I'm going to try some other victory keys that I have laying around, just see if I can get one of them to go in. This one's from a 2000 model year. Oh, that one goes in. Alright. Won't rotate it though. Maybe that cleared whatever was blocking it out of the way. Profile looks the same. There we go. There we got some rotation. And I do have some cable release. You never know. That might. There we go, team. Boy, that seat's rough. And there's grizzly squirrel poo all over it, so that's not a good sign. Oh my goodness. Get your eyeballs up in here so you can see what I'm seeing. Oh boy, I got spider dens, squirrel dens, and all kinds of weeds. This is what happens when stuff sits. It just accumulates debris. Now I've got all kinds of wires that are cut in and spliced here. I have no idea what any of that is. There's the bolts I was talking about that I need to remove to get to the fuel pump. On these bikes, the fuel pump is in the tank. Now, on the early bikes, the fuel pump was mounted on the frame rail directly below the rear shock. Here's our rear shock, you can see. And you would have to access it by removing this panel here, and you could take the shock out, or you could take one of these side panels off because they are removable, and then you could access the fuel pump and the inline fuel filter. However, in 2002, they made a change, and they located the fuel pump inside the tank. So for me to do anything with the fuel system, well, tank's got to come off. And odds are, well, There's really not anything that resembles gas in it anymore anyway. Let me swap hands here. A little more grippage with the old right hand. I'm not a southpaw. Nothing against southpaws now, guys. Don't get your left arms up in an uproar. I'm just not one of them, that's all. My grandfather was one of the most creative artists I ever knew, and he was left-handed. Yeah, but I'm using my left hand now. Okay, so I give. You guys win. Southpaws are better. I guess I need to work on coordinating mine better. Really can't see too much in there. Smells like cheap furniture polish. Yeah, you know what that means. It means our fuel has turned to varnish, and that means there's going to be gummed up goo everywhere. And our fuel pump is most likely toast. Find out shortly. Yeah, actually that might come back. For some reason, the leather seems to have held up a little better on this than on other components. I wonder if there's $1 million in here. No, not $1 million. Some spiders. Somebody has done on this bike is they've installed what we call a cone filter, hence this cone-shaped filter element. And it's a fairly large surface area. It allows a lot of air to get through while it's still filtering it. And then of course your your throttle body is right underneath this cover here. This particular design was used on the 1999 model year only. And it provided a good airflow, but it made it very difficult to access the filter for servicing and replacing. So the following year, 2000, they changed the design. They went to what they call coffin filter, and it extended up under the frame, and the coffin filter filled this void right here with part of the air chamber, and then there was a slot in the side where you could pull a filter element in and out without having to take the gas tank off. And everybody thought that was a great idea, except that the filter element had about half the surface area of the cone filter. So what a lot of folks did is they would remove the coffin filter and they would install this device. The problem is to get the coffin filter out, well, it's trapped between the engine and the frame. So to get a coffin filter out in one piece, you gotta drop the engine. Isn't that lovely? Now, a lot of us, well, we got to thinking about it. We thought, you know what, I bet I can put a cone like that on a cut-off coffin filter. And so what a lot of people would do, and I was kind of hoping this one had the coffin filter so I could show you that process. You get in here with something and you cut the coffin filter and you take it in half. And by cutting it in half, you can get the pieces out without removing the engine. And then you can fabricate a plate to bolt on the front, and you could install the original cone type filter from K&N, and you would have a homemade cone filter. Now this is not a homemade one, I can tell. And I'll show a few pictures here of the homemade ones that I've done in the past in the process. And I was going to try to make a video on that if this bike had that, but I'll just show you a few pictures here. And as you can see, it's actually a pretty easy process if you're handy with tools at all. Here we can see the coffin filter on the left and the original 99 model cone filter on the right. If we take the covers off of them, we can see that the coffin filter has a much smaller surface area, therefore more restrictive than the cone filter. Now what you can do is you can cut the front half off and you can fabricate your own cone filter. So here we have it cut in half. The far right there is the piece I will keep, and I use a piece of sheet metal, and I use the cone filter and the housing as a template to make a metal panel that I can then attach to the cut off piece of cone filter. You want to use a sealer like silicone so that air doesn't get in. You also have to cut a hole in the back for the inlet temperature sensor, which you just drill a hole and notch it, and then you'll be able to install that sensor just fine. Once it's complete, I usually put a little bit of paint on it so it doesn't look too bad, and we mount it in the bike. Again, we want to make sure it's sealed. You'll notice the screws protruding out from the panel. Those screws are from the sheet metal panel that we put in there, and they do protrude outward a little bit, so just beware of them. They can kind of scratch you, or you can grind them off. And here we have the completed filter installed on a bike. The thing about these cone filters is that a couple of other outside vendors realized that this design was better, and what they did is they went back to Polaris and they bought a whole bunch of 99 air boxes and remarketed them. They added a K&N air filter and they remarketed them as a high performance or high flow intake system, even though it was actually a factory Polaris part that was just joined with yet another part and then remarketed. So you'll see those out there, but it's exactly the same air box as the 99s used. I'm going to attempt to start it. I think I should check, make sure there's oil in it before I go too much further. Our oil dipstick, these are always too tight for my wimpy little hands, left or right hand, either one. All right, come on, Southpaw, do your thing. All right, the left hand's working great today, folks. I'm going to take back everything I said. And we have something, and whatever it is, it's fairly full. Let's have a look at the condition here. Wow, that's actually pretty darn clean. It smells like varnish though, so some of that varnishy gasoline probably got in it. It's probably got gas and stuff in it. So before we do too much, I'm probably going to go ahead and drop the oil, get some fresh in it before I do any kind of cranking on it. Previous owner told me that this engine, and you can tell by this add-on plate here, that at some point or another it had the 100 cubic inch jugs put on it. So I have no way to really confirm that, but that was what he told me. So this stands a good chance this will be a great engine. Interesting. Some kind of engine controller. That might go along with what he said about the upgrade to 100 cubic inches. The mapping on the factory ECM had to be changed to accommodate the 100 cubic inch. So that does make sense. Ew. Battery's in place. Now I don't want to try to start it until I can confirm that the oil is circulating, so let's key this thing up. Let's make sure we have oil pressure before we actually try to start it. I got hazard flashers stuck on. Yeah, that's something we'll have to address. I guess they're permanently on. It's probably dirt and debris, these hand controls. Out in the elements, stuff gets in them. I am in neutral. And my oil light is on, so we're going to crank it and see if the oil light goes off. We're in neutral, it should go. Maybe I need the clutch switch also? Shouldn't. Should crank regardless. That's not good. There it goes. Oil light went off right away. Sounds like a pretty weak battery. Let's give it a little shot of starting fluid, see what happens. Battery. I got it on charger. May not have been on long enough, but we'll soon see. Wow. Sounds like we got us a winner here, folks. Well, she lives. Some of you guys noticed when I couldn't get the hazard flashers to shut off, I kept on cycling the damn kill switch. What an idiot! You'd think, after a couple of dozen years of riding motorcycles, I would know, what the kill switch is. So, to do the fuel tank, there's a big snap ring here. This plug comes out, and then there's a nut that holds the fuel pump on those two here, and then the pump can come out through that opening, and we can replace it with a new one. Because I guarantee you that pump ain't going to run, and that fuel is just absolute garbage. So that also gives us a chance to get in there and try to clean as much rust and debris out of the tank as we possibly can. So that's our next step. And one of the things I like to do whenever I have fuel contamination is to get little Berrymans into the fuel injection rail. If it's a carburetor, I pour little Berrymans in the carburetor. While I'm working on the tank, that stuff could be soaking in there and loosening up our garbage. Now, when I took the tank off, I removed the gas cap and I turned it upside down to try and get as much of the old bad fuel out of it as I could. And it didn't really look like there was a lot of solid material or debris in it. It was still very clear liquid. So there's a good chance that fuel pump's going to be okay. So I'm going to put a little Berryman in here. I'll put a new piece of hose on there. We'll get that soaking, and then I'm going to hook up some wires to the tank and see if that pump comes on. If the pump comes on, we may get away with just simply getting rid of the old fuel, putting some fresh fuel in it. It may be all right. So we're going to find out. So, real simple. Got a piece of hose, got a little Berrymans. There are other chemicals you can use. This is the one I've used ever since I worked at an auto parts store back in the 1970s. I was always told this was the best. And there's a lot of other YouTubers that do automotive restorations, and they swear by this stuff as well. So it's probably lived up to its reputation enough that it's still kind of the number one seller. So if you guys are looking for stuff that's really good at cleaning carbon deposits, crud in general, Berryman's good stuff. So we'll let that set, and then we're going to hook the tank up to a pump. I mean, we're going to hook the pump up to a power supply. Something like that. Alright, we've got a lot of crud and debris up under here. So we might get lucky. Look at all the cobbly webs. Alright, so this is our harness. There's 4 wires. 2 of them go to the tank sending unit, and the other 2 are for the fuel pump. I believe it is the brown and the gray that go to the fuel pump, and the yellow and black, I think, are for the sending unit. I'm going to get this broken off piece of hose off of here. Put some fresh hose on it. We'll apply power to this and see if we can get some fluid out of there. And if we can, we'll pump the remaining bad fuel out, put her all back together, get some fresh gas in it, and we might actually have a runner here. Now, it's a shot. Yeesh. Okay, got some fresh hose here. Stuff that on there. Yeah, that will suffice. You know, I'm somewhat of a pack rat, got this coffee can here, and it's just full of old wire harnesses, and I save pretty much every electrical harness I come across. And a lot of Victory bikes, well, this can is pretty much exclusively from connectors I removed from Victory motorcycles. And one of them here, well, it's almost the same shape as this plug, but this has got a index in it. So I got out my torch and my hot knife, heated that knife up, and cut a nice little slot in it here so that it can be used on this plug. And then that way I don't have to try and cut into these wires or jam something into those plugs and potentially damage the pins. So I'm going to use these wires here to connect my pump, and we'll get it fired up here in a sec. This harness got melted. I don't remember where I got it. It was from I think I bought an engine from a burned motorcycle, and this harness was still on it. So, of course, I saved it. And now it's coming to fruition. It's a good thing I did save it. All right, I got a gas can to capture the bad stuff with. Got a battery. Got a jumper wire. A very burned and melted jumper wire. That's a long story. I nearly burned my garage down playing with fuel and batteries once before, but, you know, kind of sort of survived. There's enough insulation on here we can get away with it. That one's going to go on the hot side, and I need one more for the negative or ground side. Got another jumper wire here. And I do have another one here. All right. Here we go, team. Wish me luck. Pray I don't burn myself to the ground like I did last time. And go. Well, it sparked, but nothing happened. And our fuel pump is officially toast. Okay, I'm not even, got a little spark, but so I was hoping against all odds that the pump survived, but it did not. It drew quite a spark. It indicates that there's energy going to it, but it didn't spin, didn't hum, didn't dispense fuel. So the next step is to remove it from the tank. So get this out of here before I ignite. Flame on! Whew. Alright, that was worth a try. Alright, coming after you. Pump. Okay. Get this plate out of here, you need kind of a puller. I just fabricated one, just a piece of metal that can lay across here and thread into that and pull it out. It doesn't pop right out because it's kind of an interference fit, a friction fit, because there's an O-ring, a couple of O-rings in there that hold it. The tool couldn't be any simpler. Got a couple of little stands that can be propped on either side, and I got a bolt. It's a metric bolt. It's an 8mm by 1.5, 1.25, something like that. It just threads into it, and then as you tighten it, it pulls it out. Could be easier. So there's the O-rings I talked about. And here's our fuel tank sending unit. We do have a little bit of corrosive stuff. Some rust starting to form. There's our float. We can just disconnect this connector, and then we remove this nut and remove this nut, and the pump itself comes out from the top, and we can pull it down through this opening to get it out. Our fuel pump. And the way the pump is mounted up in there like this, you have a pickup hose, comes here in the light. This hose is supposed to go to a junction here, and then there's supposed to be a pickup sock on either side. The low point is here and the low point is here, these two low areas. So it's supposed to have a tube coming down this side with a pickup screen here, and a tube coming down this side with a pickup screen here. And here's what's left of the pickup screens. They're just coming apart, and they're just disintegrated. So I'm going to have to come up with a bunch of other stuff. Now, I've seen them online. You can get replacements. But before I do any of that, I've got to come up with the pump itself. And prior to putting everything back together, well, there's all kinds of broken off bits and pieces and junk in there. So the rest of that bad fuel's got to come out. We've got to flush it out, make sure it's nice and clean, and then we can start putting it back together. So I'm going to go online, start looking for parts, and then we will continue our process in part 2. Yeah, sorry guys. We'll have to make a whole nother video going back together. Well, folks, that does it for this video. When the parts come in, we'll start part 2, and we'll put that fuel system back together, and we'll see how that bike runs. We'll get it fired up properly, not just a couple of pops. We'll get it to really actually run and idle, and then we'll bring it on into the shop where we can continue to fix it up and restore it and so forth. Get it in here, we can hoist it up, get some new tires under it, and all that sort of thing. And like my good friend the Gunny says, have you got what it takes? I think I do. Well, I'm trying to anyway. Please like and subscribe, and let your friends know about this channel if you're into motorcycles, particularly if you're into Victory motorcycles and you like what I'm doing here, trying to get these things on the road. And if you ride, get out there and ride. The weather's turning nice, and ride safe. We want you to come back.